Hey y'all, we're at a different angle today. My phone's charging and it's nighttime, so I needed different lighting. Anyway, I tried to record this video earlier. I successfully recorded it, but as I tried to upload it, or not upload it, but just save it, once I was done editing it together, something happened and I lost it. So we're going to try this again, and hopefully I can get it all in one go. It was about 30 minutes the first time, and I was having technical difficulties all the while, so it was in pieces, but maybe we can do it this time. So, I'm going to talk about some of the texts that we read in my senior seminar class, when I graduated with my degree in literature, in order to graduate with a degree in literature from my university, you had to take a course, a final culminating course, and every semester, every professor who teaches it gets to choose different topics based on their expertise or their interests or whatnot. And it just so happened that when I was due to graduate, the course was Romanticism. And we covered a lot of texts, and there were some that we read that I had never seen before, and there were some that we didn't read that I would have liked to have read, and all that. So I'm going to go over some of those. And just as a heads up, when I say Romanticism or romantic, I do mean the Romantic era of literature. I'm going to say romantic text or romantic lit and romantic era and stuff like that, and I don't mean a romance novel. That is very different from the Romantic era and the Romantic literary movement. And some of the most of the texts in this selection are definitely not romances. One of them that I thought was a pretty unique choice made by my professor was Lolita, and it's not a romance. It's about a pedophile. So I just wanted to give that little disclaimer. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Romantic era ranged from about the late 1700s to the early 1900s. And this movement comes about at a time when the industrial revolutions of the world are really advancing a lot of nations, but at the same time there's a lot of poverty. There's no safety standards, there's no child labor laws or anything like that. There's no Clean Water Acts, nothing like that. So for as much as the world is advancing, there's still a lot of problems and a lot of suffering. And that is a big focus of many of the romantic writers, because in previous time periods, in the neoclassic writings and art and all that came before, all the other, medieval, Renaissance, all those different time periods. The focus is more often on morally upright art and presenting the world as this pristine version of the world and ignoring the strange, the unusual, the dark, the unpleasant, the mundane parts of life. But the Romantics come along and they want to focus on the individual, and they want to focus on emotions and nature and more of those things that, bringing things to light that haven't been brought to light before. So that's what the Romantics do, and more often than not, the Romantic writers and artists were also people who we considered to be dandies. So there's a lot of crossover in the fashion world and the art world in this time period, in the 1800s in general. And I'm interested in all of it, but my big focus is literature. So, without further ado, the first text that we read was not the first text that we read, but to me the most important one, is Frankenstein. And we read this edition, the 1818 edition. As the story goes, Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley and some of their friends, including Lord Byron, were trapped in their house during some terrible weather and on a vacation. And they challenged each other to write a ghost story. And Mary Shelley famously was the only one to finish hers. And it was Frankenstein, and she was about 19 years old at the time, and she basically founded the science fiction genre with that book. And when she published in 1918, she published anonymously. She was not only worried about the reception that she would get as a woman writer, but also writing something so intense. She was worried about the reception. And as the daughter of Wollstonecraft and Godwin, she was also worried that people would just dismiss it immediately because there was a lot of negativity surrounding her parents because they were forward-thinking people of their time. So she publishes it anonymously in 1818. And for as much positivity as people give her about how beautiful the language is, she also gets a lot of harsh criticism about the disturbing parts of the novel. She actually writes a note at the beginning that's basically an apology, explaining that she doesn't condone this disturbing events in this novel as something that she would want people to do and things like that. But she's trying to say that it's the ghost story that she wanted to tell, and that's what it should be taken as, not as an account of how she actually sees the world. And it's that note that a lot of reviews mention that note, and they say if it wasn't for this note, we would be seriously disturbed by the horrific, disgusting nature of a lot of this novel, and if it didn't have that note, we would be worried about the author, and we would recommend against reading it. But since she did include this, since the author did include this, we're gonna let you know that the language is beautiful and it's an intriguing story with tons of references to other texts and lots of interesting ideas. And that's kind of the tone a lot of the criticism at the time made. And another one of the major criticisms is the incest. In the original version, one of the main characters is to be wed to his cousin. And now there's no incestuous act, no actual consummation of the marriage or anything like that. I don't even think they kiss. But they're due to be wed, and it's made all the more creepy and uncomfortable by the fact that she is raised like his sister, and when his mother dies, she takes over for caring for his siblings. So Mary Shelley creates this whole creepy sister-cousin-mother relationship between these two characters, and kind of presents it as normal, if you will. So a lot of people were really upset by that. So eventually, maybe about 20 years later, she rewrites it and republishes it. Most of the other changes are minor, but in the second version, she makes the cousin, the wife, an adopted relative. So there's no actual blood kin relationship between the two. She's just someone who kind of got adopted into the family by chance. But Shelley keeps the creepiness of the sister-cousin-mother relationship. The cousin is still called a cousin and treated almost like a sister, and she still takes care of the her betrothed's younger brothers and sisters as if they were her own children. And, she still sees him as a brother or cousin, as kin, but Mary Shelley takes out the literal relationship of being cousins. So, if that matters to you, read the later version. If not, read the earlier version. But I do 100% recommend it if you've never read sci-fi or you've never read any of the Romantics. Start with Shelley. She was groundbreaking. And it is one of my favorite novels of all time. I've written countless essays on it for school and stuff like that. And for that class, we had to write one big essay instead of writing several smaller ones. And my big essay was on Frankenstein. So I have this cool senior paper on Frankenstein now. So I'm very proud of that. I actually love Frankenstein so much. I have several copies. I got this one when I was in Ireland. And it was, can you see that? It was only €3. That's so great. That whole bookstore was super cheap at the school that I was at, and I got a lot of books. I spent a lot of money on books. And then here's my other copy. This is my older copy. This is the later edition, and it's actually torn, and I was kind of upset by it until I realized that I could stitch it up just like Frankenstein's monster, so I will do that one of these days. Let's see. Another thing we read was Wordsworth and Coleridge. They're lyrical ballads, and I skimmed most of this. We didn't talk very much about it. The main thing we read was from the Ancient Mariner, and if anything out of this set, I would recommend reading that, because one of the countless literary references that Mary Shelley makes, one of them involves Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So if you read Rime of the Ancient Mariner, it will influence your reading of Mary Shelley, well, Frankenstein, in a positive way. So another thing we read was some of the poems of Emily Dickinson. It's huge, there's tons. It's like a Harry Potter sized book, like 600 something pages. These are someone else's notes I thought I used, but we read a few of her poems. And what I want to tell you about her work is that if you read her poems, pay very close attention to the punctuation. Follow it. Whenever there is a piece of punctuation, you should pause. So don't rush through it. People jokingly say that you can read a lot of Emily Dickinson's work to the tune of Gilligan's Island theme song, and you can. Some of it does follow that meter, if you kind of trot through it. If you don't, if you take the time to pay attention to her punctuation, you get a much more nuanced reading of each little poem. And I do really recommend her poems. I had never read her before, and we didn't spend a ton of time talking about her, but it's really her backstory that is truly fascinating. She was a very private person, and like I said, she's very, very particular about her punctuation. So she didn't publish a lot in her lifetime, but when she did, some of the people who were putting her poems down to be published took out the punctuation and just put more basic punctuation than what she had, because she had very particular punctuation marks. And they changed it, and it completely changed the way the poem sounds. You know, it changed the way it looks on the paper and everything. And she was adamant that they fix it. And that's how particular she was about her punctuation, and that's how much it matters to the reading of her. And I think it is important to read her because, you know, she was a very private person, and people gossiped about her and criticized her a lot, and they called her this crazy recluse old maid who just stayed in her house and scribbled her little poems. But she was so much more than that. But we will never know the true depth to who she was, because of all the criticism she got, you know, all the poor treatment she got. When she became old and she was dying, she told her loved ones to burn everything she wrote, all of it. And she didn't want it to ever go out into the world. And her loved ones complied in that they burned all her letters and diaries. That's all gone. It's all lost to us. But they did keep her poems, and they published her poems. So Well, I mean, this does seem like a lot, but this is all we have left of her, and she wrote every day of her life, you know, for years and years and years, so there was so much more that we could have had. So we should appreciate what we do have, because people tried to silence her, just like many, many other women in her time period. Alright, I'm going to take a little break, and I'll be right back.